trading station at Nexus Prime was the busiest place in this sector of space, and thousands of aliens from hundreds of worlds came here to buy and sell and trade, and among them walked creatures that made others step aside and whisper in fear. Kira, of the Sylvan Empire, moved through the crowded corridors like a queen walking through her palace, and she stood 7 feet tall with silver hair that reached past her waist and skin that seemed to glow with a soft blue light, and her eyes were the color of distant stars, and they held the wisdom of 400 years. But what made people move away was not just her beauty or her height, and it was the two massive creatures that walked behind her, on either side. Ash and Ember were dragons, and not the small pet kind that some species kept, but real dragons that stood as tall as cargo shuttles, and their scales shifted between black and deep red like cooling lava, and their eyes glowed with intelligence that was older than most civilizations. And when they breathed, the air shimmered with heat. Every species in the galaxy knew the rules about elves and their dragons, and the first rule was simple, and you did not touch them, and you did not speak to them unless they spoke first, and you definitely did not get in their way. Kira was here on official business for her empire, and she needed to pick up communication crystals from a vendor on the lower level, and she did not enjoy these trips to common stations, but duty required it. And so she endured the stares and the fear, and the way everyone treated her like she might explode at any moment. Behind her, Ash made a low rumbling sound, and she reached back without looking and touched his scaled neck. "And easy, brother," she said in the old language, "and we will be gone soon." The corridor ahead was packed with aliens loading cargo, and Kira moved forward with her usual grace, and her ceremonial tail ornament swayed behind her, and it was made of silver bells and blue silk, and it marked her as royalty among her people. She did not see the human until it was too late. Jake Morris was having the worst day of his career as a cargo hauler, and his ship had broken down twice, and the repairs had cost him 3 days, and now he was running late on a delivery that would cost him his contract if he did not make it on time. He was rushing through the station with a data pad in one hand and a coffee substitute in the other, and his mind was running through calculations about fuel costs and flight times, and he was definitely not paying attention to where he was going. Something long and silky swept across his path and caught his boot, and Jake stumbled and his cargo hauler instincts kicked in, and he grabbed whatever was trying to trip him and gave it an annoyed yank. The entire corridor went silent. Jake looked down and saw he was holding something that looked like decorated fabric with tiny silver bells, and then he looked up and saw the most stunning woman he had ever seen staring at him with wide, shocked violet eyes. Oh no, Jake thought. Kira had been touched by many things in her long life, and weapons and flames and the cold of space, but never had anyone simply grabbed her tail and pulled it like they were annoyed with a piece of loose rope. She froze, and her hand went automatically to the plasma blade at her hip and behind her. Both Ash and Ember released sounds that were part growl and part roar, and the deck plates under everyone's feet began to vibrate. Every alien in the corridor either ran or dropped flat to the ground. The Valorian merchant who had been arguing about prices threw himself behind his stall, and a group of Centauri traders actually climbed into an open cargo container and sealed it shut, and somewhere an alarm started blaring, because the station sensors had detected the heat signature of 2 very angry dragons. Jake Morris stood there, still holding the silky thing, and his brain finally caught up to his situation. Was holding part of an alien, and a really tall, beautiful, scary alien, and her 2 dragon friends looked like they wanted to turn him into a small pile of ash. He let go immediately and held up both hands and said, "Sorry, ma'am. I did not mean to grab. You're, and he gestured helplessly because he had no idea what he had just grabbed. Kira stared at this creature, and humans were new to the galactic community, and she had seen pictures but never met one in person, and he was short compared to her, and maybe 5'9" with messy brown hair and oil stains on his jacket, and he looked embarrassed and nervous but not terrified. That was wrong. Everyone was terrified of elves. "You touched my tail," she said, and her voice came out colder than she intended. Jake winced, and "Yeah, I see that now, and I am really sorry. I thought it was like a scarf or something. Dragging on the ground. It is attached to me." Kira said. Ash took a step forward, and flames flickered between his teeth, and Ember spread her wings slightly, and the few aliens still in the corridor pressed themselves against the walls. Jake looked at the dragons and then back at Kira and said, "Okay, So that was really rude of me, and I apologize, and is there like a formal apology process? Or do I just let your dragon friends handle this because I have insurance, but I do not think it covers being eaten? Kira blinked. Did this human just make a joke about his own death? She had executed people for less than what he had done, and the law of her people was clear. An unauthorized touch was an insult that required blood, and yet this strange creature was standing there making jokes about insurance. Something bubbled up in her chest, and something she had not felt in decades, and before she could stop herself, she laughed. The sound echoed through the corridor, and it was musical and clear and impossible. Ash and Ember both turned their massive heads to stare at their bonded partner, and confused chirping sounds came from their throats. The Valorian merchant peeked out from behind his stall and wondered if he was hallucinating. Elves did not laugh. Everyone knew that. But Kira was laughing, and she put one hand over her mouth trying to stop. But the absurdity of it all was too much, and this human had grabbed her tail like it was laundry, and then apologized like he had bumped into someone at a market. Jake stood there not sure if laughing was good or bad, and so, does this mean I am not dragon food? Kira took a breath and composed herself. And you are either very brave or very stupid human. Definitely stupid, Jake said, and can I, buy you a drink to apologize properly? And that was how everything changed. Kira sat in a corner booth of the station cantina and tried to remember the last time she had done something this unexpected, and she could not, and 400 years of memory, and not one instance of sitting in a common establishment with a stranger, drinking something that tasted like synthetic fruit. Across from her, Jake Morris sipped his own drink and tried not to stare at the 7-foot-tall elf woman with glowing skin and silver hair, and he was definitely failing. Outside the cantina window, Ash and Ember had curled up like massive cats, and every person who walked past gave them a wide space, and the station security had shown up twice, but took one look at the dragons and decided this was not their problem. So Jake said after an awkward silence, and do all elves have tails, or is that like a special thing? Kira raised one elegant eyebrow. And all of my people have them, and it is considered our most sacred feature. And touching one without permission is the greatest insult possible. Jake set down his drink and, okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how badly did I mess up? Kira considered this, and in the old days I would have challenged you to ritual combat, and Ash would have incinerated you before you could draw breath. And now, Jake asked, nervously, now I am sitting here drinking something purple and wondering why humans do not teach basic manners. Kira said, but there was no anger in her voice and just curiosity. Jake relaxed slightly, and we do teach manners, but I was running late and stressed, and my brain was not working, and that is not an excuse, but it is an explanation. What were you rushing to do? Kira asked. Cargo delivery, Jake said, and I haul supplies between stations and colonies, and it is not exciting, but it pays the bills, and right now I am 3 days late because my ship keeps breaking down. Your ship is broken, Kira said. Jake laughed, and my ship is always broken, and she is 40 years old, and I bought her cheap, and I spend half my time fixing things, but she flies, and that is what matters. Kira had never heard someone speak about a ship with such affection, and elven vessels were perfect machines maintained by expert technicians, and the idea of flying something that constantly broke was absurd. Why not buy a better ship, she asked. Jake shrugged, and because better ships cost money I do not have, and besides I like fixing things, and there is something satisfying about keeping an old machine running. Kira studied him, and this human was nothing like what she had expected, and humans were supposed to be aggressive and loud and always trying to prove themselves, but Jake seemed comfortable with his limitations, and even found humor in them. Tell me about your dragons, Jake said. And are they like pets or partners or what? Ash opened one eye and gave Jake a look that suggested pets was not the right word. They are bonded to me, Kira explained, and we chose each other when I was young, and we share thoughts and feelings, and they are part of my soul. That is beautiful, Jake said. And how long have you been together? 370 years, Kira said. Jake choked on his drink. And you are over 300 years old. I am 412. Kira said, and is that shocking you? Do not look a day over 25, Jake said, and then added, and is that rude to say? And I am really bad at knowing what is rude with aliens. Kira found herself smiling, and it is not rude, and elves age slowly, and I will look like this for another 1,000 years. Jake whistled. And that must be nice, and I will be lucky to hit 80. The difference in their lifespans hung in the air between them, and Kira felt a strange sadness at the thought, and this human who made her laugh would be gone in a blink and barely a moment in her long existence. Why did you laugh earlier, Jake asked, and when I grabbed your tail and you could have killed me but you laughed instead? Kira thought about this, and because no one has treated me like a normal person in 200 years, and everyone bows and everyone fears me and everyone follows the protocols, but you just grabbed my tail like I was someone in your way at a market. So I made you laugh by being rude, Jake said, grinning. You made me laugh by being human, Kira corrected. They talked for another hour, and Jake told her about Earth and about oceans and mountains and weather that changed, and Kira told him about the Sylvan homeworld, where trees grew a mile high and cities floated in the clouds, and neither of them noticed the time passing. Finally, Jake checked his datapad and groaned, and I really need to go, and my delivery is now 4 days late, and I am definitely losing this contract. Kira made a decision that she knew would cause problems later, and I will help you. Jake blinked and what? My people owe you a debt, Kira said, and you could have reported this incident and caused a diplomatic crisis but you accepted my apology drink instead, and let me make your delivery with you, Jake laughed. And you want to help me haul cargo, and you are a princess with dragons. I am a warrior who is bored, Kira said, standing, and her head nearly touched the ceiling. And your broken ship sounds more interesting than another ceremony, Ash. And Ember rose to their feet and stretched, and aliens scattered. Jake stood too, and okay, but I warn you, and my ship is really ugly and really old, and you might regret this. Kira smiled, and I do not think I will. They left the cantina together, and the 7-foot-tall elf princess and the human cargo hauler, and behind them 2 dragons followed, and across the station. People whispered and recorded and sent messages, and because this was not normal, and this was history being made. And no one knew. Yet Jake led her to Docking Bay 7, and his ship was there, and a beat-up old freighter with mismatched hull panels and scorch marks, and the name painted on the side said, Lucky Girl. Kira looked at it. And this is your ship, Jake patted the hull affectionately, and this is my girl, and she is beautiful in her own way. Ash sniffed the ship and made a disapproving rumble. She flies, Jake said defensively, and most of the time. Kira laughed again and realized she had laughed more in the past 2 hours than in the past 2 centuries. This human was dangerous in ways he did not understand. Take me to see this broken engine, she said, and let us make your delivery. And that was how Kira of the Sylvan Empire ended up crawling through engine spaces, with grease on her hands for the first time in her very long life. The engine room of the Lucky Girl was cramped and hot and filled with the smell of oil and ozone, and Kira had to bend almost double to fit through the doorways, and her silver hair kept getting caught on exposed pipes. Jake was wedged into a maintenance shaft with half his body invisible, and his voice echoed strangely as he shouted, And can you hand me the plasma wrench and the blue one? Kira looked at the scattered tools and found something that might be a plasma wrench, and it was blue. And she passed it into the shaft. Thanks, Jake called. And okay, so the power coupling is completely fried and I can bypass it. But we will only have about 70% thrust. Is that enough to reach your destination? Kira asked. Should be, Jake said. And unless we hit another problem, Ash and Ember were too large to fit inside the ship, so they had curled up outside the docking bay and creating what Jake called the most expensive security system in the station. This is not how I expected today to go, Kira said, looking around the messy engine room. Yeah, sorry about the mess, Jake said, and I was not expecting royal company. Kira picked up a strange device and examined it. And what is royal about sitting in a palace following rules that are 10,000 years old, and at least here things are interesting? There was a loud bang from inside the shaft, and Jake cursed and then said sorry. And then there was sparking. Are you injured? Kira asked, moving closer. Just my pride, Jake said, crawling backwards out of the shaft, and his face was smudged with grease, and he was grinning but I got it, and we can fly. He stood up and immediately hit his head on a low pipe and cursed again, and Kira caught his arm to steady him. You are very clumsy, she observed. Is one of my best features, Jake said, rubbing his head. They were standing very close in the cramped space, and Kira noticed that despite being covered in grease and smelling like engine coolant, and Jake looked happy, and genuinely happy in a way, she rarely saw. When do you smile like that? She asked, like what Jake said, like you have exactly what you want. Kira said. Jake looked around the messy engine room and shrugged. And I guess I do. And I mean, I know this ship is a disaster, and I know I am, always broken. But this is mine, and I built this life myself, and nobody gave it to me. Kira felt something twist in her chest, and everything in her life had been given to her, and her title, and her position, and her duties, and all of it handed down through bloodlines, and she had never built anything herself. What is that like? She asked quietly, and to choose your own path. Scary, Jake admitted, but also kind of great, and because when things go wrong, it is my fault, and when things go right, I actually earned it. The ship intercom crackled, and a station voice announced in Docking Bay 7, "You are cleared for departure in 30 minutes. Jake moved to the cockpit, and Kira followed, and ducking through doorways, and the cockpit was small, with 2 seats and dozens of displays that looked outdated by several decades. "This is your command center," Kira said. Jake dropped into the pilot seat and started flipping switches yep, and she is not fancy. But everything works. And mostly Kira took the co-pilot seat and had to adjust it all the way back to fit her long legs. And through the viewport she could see Ash and Ember stretching their wings. "Can your dragons keep up with the ship?" Jake asked. Kira smiled. "And they can fly faster than any vessel you have ever seen." Jake raised his eyebrows. "And faster than this beautiful machine and impossible." Ash appeared in the viewport and fixed Jake with a stare that clearly communicated challenge. Accepted. 20 minutes later, the lucky girl lifted off from Nexus Prime. And Jake was right that she only had 70% thrust, and the ship shook and rattled and made concerning noises, but they were flying. Beside them, Ash and Ember soared through space like they were swimming, and their wings spread wide and their scales reflected starlight, and they moved with a grace that made the ship look clumsy. "Okay," Jake admitted. "And your dragons are faster." Kira watched them fly and felt the joy they felt through their bond. And they had been grounded on the station for 3 days, and they needed this. The journey to the delivery point would take 6 hours, and Jake set the autopilot and leaned back in his seat. "So Kira," he said, "and what happens when we land? And do you go back to your empire and I go back to my cargo runs?" Kira had been thinking about this, and I do not know. And I am supposed to be attending a council meeting in 2 days, and they will be looking for me. "Will you get in trouble?" Jake asked. "Probably," Kira said, "and leaving without my guard and traveling with an unknown human and helping with cargo delivery, and none of that is appropriate for someone of my rank." Jake frowned. "And I do not want to cause you problems." "You already did?" Kira said. But they are interesting problems, and that is new." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and watching the stars stream past, and Kira realized she felt more relaxed than she had in years. "Can I ask you something?" Jake said. "Yes," Kira replied. "Why do elves hate everyone?" she asked. "And I mean, no offense, but your people have a reputation for being cold and distant." "We do not hate everyone," Kira said slowly. "And we are just old. And when you have seen empires rise and fall, and when you have watched species destroy themselves and you learn to keep distance, that sounds lonely." Jake said. "It is," Kira admitted, "and very lonely." The ship alert chimed, and Jake checked the display. "And okay, we are halfway there, and smooth flying from here." Kira looked at him. "And what will you do after this delivery?" "Find another contract," Jake said, "and try to keep my ship running and the usual." She made a decision. "And what if you had a steady contract and official transport for the Sylvan Empire?" Jake nearly fell out of his chair. "And what?" "My people need ships that can go places our official vessels cannot," Kira said, "and small ports and frontier stations and places where an elven warship would cause panic, and you could do that work. Why would you trust me with that?" Jake asked. "Because you grabbed my tail and apologized instead of running," Kira said. "And because you treated me like a person. And because I think humans might be what the galaxy needs." Jake stared at her. "And that is either the best offer I have ever gotten, or you are setting me up for something." "It is a real offer," Kira said, "but there is one condition." "Here it comes," Jake said. You let me come with you sometimes, Kira said, and I want to see the galaxy the way you see it and not from a palace or a warship. Jake grinned and but I warn you, and most of my trips involve broken engines and bad food. That sounds perfect, Kira said. Ash sent a feeling of approval through the bond, and Ember did a barrel roll outside the ship. The lucky girl flew on toward its destination and carrying a human cargo hauler who had accidentally changed everything, and an elf princess who was choosing her own path for the first time in 400 years. Behind them, the galaxy was already starting to notice. 3 months after the tail incident, and as people were calling it, and Jake and Kira had become legends in the frontier, and the cargo hauler and the princess were known on every station and colony between here and the core worlds. But fame brought problems. They were docked at Freedom Station doing routine maintenance when Jake noticed they were being watched, and 3 humans in expensive suits were standing near the docking bay and pretending not to stare at the lucky girl. Kira, we have company, Jake said quietly. I see them, Kira replied, and she was under the ship checking the landing gear, and her hands were covered in grease, and her silver hair was tied back with a piece of wire. The 3 humans approached, and the leader was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a confident walk. Captain Morris, she said, and I am Director Liu from the Human Colonial Authority, and we need to talk. Jake wiped his hands on a rag. And talk about what? About the fact that you have an elf princess working as your co-pilot, Liu said, and about the fact that you are creating diplomatic incidents everywhere you go. We deliver cargo, Jake said. And how is that creating incidents? You delivered medical supplies to a colony that was under quarantine by the Centauri government, Liu said, and you transported refugees that 3 different species were looking for, and you keep showing up in places where humans are not supposed to be. The people needed help. Jake said, that is not your decision to make. Liu replied, and you are a civilian and you cannot make policy. Kira emerged from under the ship and stood to her full height, and Liu took an involuntary step back. I make my own decisions, Kira said, and Jake helps people who need it, and that is why I stay with him. Director Liu recovered her composure. And Princess Kira, and your presence has changed everything. And other elves are starting to question their empire. And some are even talking about joining human crews. Is that bad? Kira asked. It is complicated, Liu said. And the Sylvan Empire is one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. And if it starts to fracture because of you, and there could be consequences, then perhaps it should fracture, Kira said calmly. And perhaps my people need to remember they are individuals and not just pieces of an empire. Liu looked between them. And you 2 do not understand what you have started. Oh, we understand, Jake said, and we just do not care about politics, and we care about getting supplies to people who need them. One of the other officials spoke up, and Captain Morris, and we are prepared to offer you an official contract and exclusive routes and guaranteed income, and all you have to do is stop taking unauthorized missions. Jake looked at Kira, and she looked at him, and they both smiled. No thanks, Jake said. You are turning down financial security, Liu said, incredulous. We are turning down being controlled, Jake corrected. Liu shook her head, and you are making a mistake, and there are people in the government who see you as a threat? Jake laughed, and I fly a 40-year-old freighter, and I am broke most of the time, and I am the least threatening person in the galaxy. You have an elf princess and 2 dragons, Liu said, and that makes you very threatening. Kira stepped forward, and Director Liu and I left my empire because I was tired of being used as a symbol, and I will not let your government do the same. And Jake and I help people because it is right, and not because it serves anyone's political agenda. Liu studied them for a long moment. And you really believe that? Do not you? Yes, Kira said. The director sighed, and all right, and I tried. But when this blows up in your faces, and do not say, I did not warn you. And her officials left, and Jake let out a breath he did not know he was holding. That was intense, he said. It will get worse, Kira said. And more people will try to use us. Then we keep saying no. Jake replied. Outside the ship, Ash rumbled agreement, and Ember sent a mental image of burning anyone who tried to control them. They finished the maintenance and prepared to leave, but before they could undock, and an urgent transmission came through. It was from a small mining colony on the edge of explored space, and Jake recognized the code, and it was a distress signal. Jake opened the channel, and this is the lucky girl, And what is your emergency? The voice that answered was panicked, and this is Colony 7. And we have a medical crisis, and our doctor is dead, and we have 30 people sick with something unknown, and please, we need help. Jake looked at the nav computer, and that colony is 2 days away at full speed. Kira was already strapping into her seat, and then we leave now. But we just turned down that government contract, Jake said, and we have no official authority to respond to this. Since when do we care about authority? Kira asked. Jake grinned, and never, and let us go. Save some lives. The lucky girl launched from Freedom Station, with Ash and Ember following, and they pushed the engines to maximum and ignoring the warnings about stress on the old systems. For 2 days they flew, and Jake slept in shifts while Kira monitored the controls, and Ash and Ember took turns flying, ahead to scout. And they were a team now and working together like they had done this for years instead of months. They reached Colony 7 and found it worse than expected, and the small settlement was in chaos and people were dying and the remaining colonists were overwhelmed. Kira had training in emergency medicine, and all elves did because they lived so long and they accumulated skills, and she immediately took charge and organizing the sick and identifying symptoms and working to find a cure. Jake used his ship's medical scanner, and limited as it was, and uploaded the data to every hospital he could reach, and begging for help. Ash and Ember did something unexpected, and they used their fire to sterilize equipment and to heat water, and to provide light when the colony power failed. For 3 days they worked without rest, and Kira moved between patients with impossible grace, and her hands steady, and her voice calm, and Jake hauled supplies and fixed broken equipment, and did whatever was needed. The dragon stood guard in keeping the scared colonists safe and proving they were more than weapons. On the 4th day help arrived, and a medical ship from the nearest core world, and they brought doctors and supplies and real equipment. The lead doctor was a Centauri who took one look at Kira covered in blood and exhaustion and said, "You saved them, and without you they would all be dead." Kira swayed on her feet, and Jake caught her, and we just did what needed to be done. The doctor studied them, and you are the cargo hauler and the princess, and I have seen the news, that is us. Jake said, "You are either heroes or fools," the doctor said. Probably both, Kira said, and then she collapsed. Jake carried her back to the ship, and Ash and Ember hovering close and worried. She woke up 12 hours later in the medical bay, and Jake had installed after the 3rd time they had needed one, and he was sitting beside her and asleep in a chair. Kira smiled and reached out and touched his hand. Jake woke immediately, and "Hey, and you are okay, just tired," Kira said. "And the colonists all alive?" The doctor said, "And you found the cure in some kind of fungal infection, and they are treating it now." "Good," Kira said, "and we should go." Jake laughed. "And you just collapsed from exhaustion, and maybe we rest first." Kira sat up slowly, "And there will be more colonies and more people who need help, and we cannot rest yet." "You are going to kill yourself being noble," Jake said. "Then die with me," Kira replied. And smiling, Jake took her hand and "Okay, but we are getting you actual medical training in the formal kind." "I am 400 years old," Kira said, "and I have medical training, human medical training," Jake said. "And because you keep working on humans, now deal," Kira said. They left Colony 7 3 days later, and the colonists lined up to thank them, and children waved at the dragons, and someone had painted "Thank you, Princess Kira" on the side of a building as they flew away. Jake looked at her. "And you know we could have died." "I know," Kira said, "and we will probably do this again." Jake said, "Definitely." Kira agreed. "This is insane," Jake said, and grinning, "This is living," Kira corrected. Behind them, Ash and Ember flew through space, and ahead of them, the galaxy waited, and full of people who needed help and full of adventures they had not yet found. The lucky girl was still old and still broken and still beautiful. And now it carried something more than cargo, it carried hope. The delivery went perfectly, and which Jake said was suspicious because nothing ever went perfectly, and the colony administrator took one look at Kira and her dragons and decided not to complain about the 4-day delay. Word spreads fast in the frontier, and by the time they left the colony, and 3 news agencies had already sent requests for interviews, and someone had posted a video titled "Elf Princess Helps Human Cargo Hauler," and it had 17 million views. Jake showed Kira the video on his datapad, and we are famous. Kira watched herself climbing into his ship, and her formal robes covered in engine grease, and this will cause problems, Is that bad? Jake asked. She smiled and probably. But I do not care anymore. The lucky girl was halfway back to Nexus Prime when Jake received an incoming transmission, and he looked at the ID code and went pale. What is wrong? Kira asked. That is a Sylvan Empire frequency, he said. Kira straightened in her seat and put it through. The holographic display activated and a stern-looking elf appeared, and he wore the dark robes of the Imperial Guard. And his silver eyes were cold. Princess Kira, he said, and his tone was respectful but barely. And you are required to return immediately. And the Emperor demands your presence. I am currently engaged in diplomatic work. Kira replied smoothly. Diplomatic work, the guard said, and his eyes flicked to Jake and with a human cargo holler. His name is Jake Morris, Kira said. And yes. This is not appropriate, the guard said. And you will return now, and your dragons will escort you, and the human will be investigated. No, Kira said. The guard blinked. And no. No, Kira repeated. And I am exactly where I choose to be. And if the Emperor wishes to speak with me, and he can send a message like everyone else. Princess, the situation is not a request. Then it is a command. I am refusing, Kira said. And tell the Emperor that I am taking a leave of absence. You cannot take leave. The guard sputtered. And you are the heir to the throne, which is why I can do what I want, Kira said. And now if you will excuse us, and we have another delivery to make. She cut the transmission. Jake stared at her. And did you just tell your empire to leave you alone? Yes, Kira said. And I did that. Was amazing, Jake said, and also possibly insane. Probably both, Kira agreed, but I meant what I said, and I am tired of being a symbol. Ash sent a feeling of fierce approval, and Ember projected the mental equivalent of applause. What happens now, Jake asked. Now we find more work, Kira said, and you need credits, and I need to see what humans do when they are not being watched by ancient empires. Over the next month, they ran 7 deliveries, and each one stranger than the last, and they hauled medical supplies to a mining colony, and transported a family of refugees to a safe station, and even delivered a shipment of luxury food to a restaurant on the edge of explored space. Kira learned how to read star charts and how to calculate fuel efficiency, and how to fix the plasma couplings when they inevitably failed, and Jake taught her human curse words, which she used with great enthusiasm when the engine broke down for the 3rd time in 1 week. Ash and Ember became minor celebrities in colonies, would request their presence just to see real dragons and children, would ask to touch their scales and the dragons who had once been feared. Weapons discovered they enjoyed being admired, but the Sylvan Empire was not done. They were on approach to a fuel station when 6 warships dropped out of hyperspace and surrounded them, and they were sleek, deadly vessels that made the lucky girl look like a toy. Jake looked at the tactical display. And, Kira, and I think your people are serious this time. The lead warship transmitted, and it was not a guard this time, and it was Commander Theron and one of the highest-ranking military officers in the Empire. Princess Kira, he said, and his voice was tired, and you have made your point. And please, return home. I am home, Kira said, gesturing around the cramped cockpit. This is a cargo freighter, Theron said. Yes, Kira agreed. And it is mine. You are the heir to an empire that spans 1,000 worlds, Theron said. I know, Kira replied. And I am choosing something else, the human Theron said, and looking at Jake. And what did you do to her? Jake raised his hands, and I grabbed her tail by accident, and everything since then has not been my fault. Theron looked confused. And you, what? It is complicated, Kira said, and Commander, I respect you, but I am not returning. The Emperor will not accept this, Theron said. Then the Emperor will have to learn acceptance, Kira replied. There was a long silence, and finally Theron sighed. And you are serious about this? Completely, Kira said. What do you want me to tell the Council? Theron asked. Tell them I am establishing first contact protocols with humanity, Kira said. And tell them I am learning their culture, and tell them whatever you need. But I am staying. Theron studied her for a long moment, and then he smiled slightly. And you have your mother's stubbornness, Kira felt a pang of emotion, and her mother had died 200 years ago, and she missed her. Your mother would have liked this, Theron said. And she always said you were meant for something different. You knew my mother well, Kira said. I did, Theron replied, and she would be proud of you, and even if the council is not. The warships began to withdraw, but before the transmission ended, and Theron said, and Princess, and be careful, and the galaxy is more dangerous than you remember. I have Ash and Ember, Kira said, and I have Jake, the human who grabbed your tail, Theron said, and that will be in the history books someday. It better be, Jake muttered. The warships jumped away, and Kira sat back in her seat. That went better than expected, she said. Your people just surrounded us with warships, Jake said, and that was better. They did not fire, Kira pointed out. Fair enough, Jake said. And so we are really doing this, and you are really staying. I am really staying, Kira confirmed. Jake grinned, and okay then, and welcome to the cargo hauling business, and the pay is terrible and the hours are worse, but the company is pretty good. Kira smiled, and I think I will like it. They continued to the fuel station, and behind them Ash and Ember flew loops, and celebrating their freedom, word reached Earth within days, and humanity had somehow convinced an elf princess to abandon her empire and join a cargo crew, and the diplomatic corps did not know whether to panic or celebrate. The Galactic Council held an emergency session, but no laws had been broken, and Kira was an adult by any measure, and she could choose her own path. And so a new pattern began, and the Lucky Girl with its human pilot and elf co-pilot and 2 dragon escorts, and became a common sight in the frontier. They were not just hauling cargo anymore, and they were building something new. A friendship that the galaxy had never seen, and a partnership between the oldest species and the newest, and proof that sometimes the best alliances start with an accident, and an apology, and a willingness to laugh. Jake still said sorry about the tail at least once a week. Kira still laughed every time, and the stars watched and waiting to see what they would do next.